Hare Krishna. When the mind accepts the impure to be impure, we become pure. Impurity is essentially a perception distorter. For example, let's take a gross example that say if there's an alcoholic, the alcoholic's mind is contaminated by the impurity of attachment to alcohol, addiction to alcohol, and because of that impurity of addiction to alcohol, the alcoholic finds the alcohol bottle as irresistible. Although that alcohol is causing so much suffering, the alcoholic thinks that, oh, this is the source of pleasure, and separation from it is the cause of suffering. So impurity is a perception distorter. It makes the very thing which is the cause of our suffering seem to be the source of pleasure. This principle applies to all kinds of impurities. For example, we can consider sex. Lust is a perception distorter. Now, there is a dharmic way in which lust can be satisfied through marriage. But when lust as an impurity is present, dominant in the consciousness, then it distorts our perception so that, firstly, temporary bodies, which are nothing but bags of flesh ultimately, they seem to be irresistible sources of pleasure. In fact, every body is a source of suffering for the embodied. But lust makes that very body seem to be the source of pleasure for someone else. If something can't give pleasure to the possessor of that very body, that body cannot give a pleasure to that particular person, but lust makes us imagine that body will give pleasure to me. Actually, that body causes disease and so much suffering to that person itself. But the point is, lust distorts our perception. And further, lust may distort it in what sense? That illicit, immoral forms of sexual gratification, lust makes them seem to be adventurous, to be cool. If I can do this and get away with it, then I am so smart, I am enjoying so much. Lust makes us think like that. And in that way, people quote so much suffering. Through extramarital affairs, they can get diseases, they can get scandals, there are divorces, and there can be blackmail, and so many complications can come up. Apart from, of course, ultimately, the bad karma that they are doing, and they are getting the suffering for that. They will get the suffering for that. So the essential point is that when the impurity of lust makes the impure seem pure, makes it seem not exactly pure but attractive. Now we could use pure in a broad sense, in the sense that actually the way devotees want to see God everywhere, have pictures of God, pictures of Krishna everywhere, and lusty people want to see good looking forms everywhere. So practically speaking, they are worshipping those forms. So in one sense, lust distorts our perception like this. So now, what do we have to do? These impurities are present in our mind, and we do have an intelligence about the mind by which we can and should control the impure urges that come upon us from the mind. So although we may feel something as irresistibly attractive, when we know intellectually that actually it is wrong, it is immoral, it is undesirable, it is not good for me to do this, then we can and should control it. But still, it's a struggle, it's a battle. And if we fight this battle, we may feel I am simply torturing myself by saying no. But if we keep fighting that battle, and more importantly, we start connecting ourselves with higher happiness. when we when we practice bhakti yoga and we repeatedly expose ourselves to Krishna, who is the source of unlimited happiness, then that repeated exposure to Krishna gradually persuades the mind that Krishna is the source of real happiness, and all those objects that I was thinking of as the source of pleasure, they are actually not the source of pleasure, they are the sources of trouble. So in this way, when the mind accepts the impure to be impure, that means the mind refuses to be deluded by the perception distortion that the impurity does. That means even now, if we let lust influence us, then we'll start getting attracted towards impure things. But when the mind doesn't get attracted to them, then actually we become pure. When the mind accepts that Krishna is the source of happiness, not these things, then we become pure. The Bhagavad Gita talks about this in the 6th chapter. In 6.27 it says, Prashanta manasam hiyenam yoginam sukham uttamam upaiti shanta rajasam brahmabhutam akalmasham. So Prashanta manasam hiyenam, by sustained practice of yoga, that's what the previous verses have talked about. Prashanta manasam, the mind becomes very peaceful. Yoginam sukham uttamam, and the yogi experiences uttama sakha, the ultimate happiness. Upaiti shanta rajasam, the mode of passion, rajoguna, becomes pacified. Brahma bhutam akalmasham, at that time one becomes situated at the Brahma platform and akalmasham, there are no more impurities. So essentially, when we become pure, that means when the mind becomes pure, mind accepts the impure to be impure, then the mind becomes peaceful. Prashanta manasam hiyenam, and the mind becomes peaceful and we become joyful. We become joyful, sukham uttamam. Why? Because bhakti connects us with Krishna and always offers us constant joy. But the mind keeps distracting us, and those distractions interfere with the joy of devotion. But when the mind is pure, then it no longer distracts us from Krishna. When there is no interference with the joy of devotion, then we become constantly joyful. So knowing that that constant joyfulness will come upon us, will be ours eventually, we can persevere right now, refusing to enjoy impure things, but persevering on the path of purity. Thank you. Hare Krishna.